Hey there, pilots! This is Dauntless Sam, and today we'll be looking at the history of the Hawker Hurricane and its flight characteristics in War Thunder. The Hawker Hurricane is a British single-seat fighter aircraft that was designed and predominantly built by Hawker Aircraft for the Royal Air Force. Although largely overshadowed by the Supermarine Spitfire, the aircraft became renowned during the Battle of Britain, accounting for 60% of the RAF's air victories in the battle, and served in all major theaters of the Second World War. The 1930s design evolved through several versions and adaptations, resulting in a series of aircraft that acted as interceptor fighters, fighter bombers, also called Hurry bombers, and ground support aircraft. Further versions, known as the Sea Hurricane, had modifications which enabled operation from ships. Some were converted as catapult-launched convoy escorts, known as Hurrycats. More than 14,000 Hurricanes were built by the end of 1944, including at least 800 converted to Sea Hurricanes, and some 1,400 built in Canada by Canadian Car and Foundry. At the time that the Hurricane was developed, RAF Fighter Command consisted of just 13 squadrons, each equipped with either the Hawker Fury, Hawker Demon, or the Bristol Bulldog, all biplanes with fixed-pitched wooden propellers and non-retractable undercarriages. Sidney Cam's design to meet F-730, the Hawker PV-3, was essentially a scaled-up version of the Fury, and was not among the proposals submitted to the Air Ministry selected for building as a government-sponsored prototype. After the rejection of the PV-3, Cam started working on a cantilever monoplane with a fixed undercarriage armed with 4 machine guns and powered by a Rolls-Royce Goosehawk. Detailed drawings were finished by January 1934, but failed to impress the Air Ministry enough for the prototype to be ordered. Cam's response was to further develop the design, introducing a retractable undercarriage and replacing the unsatisfactory Goosehawk with a new Rolls-Royce design, the PV-12, later to be famous as the Merlin. In August of 1934, a 1/10 scale model was made and sent to the National Physical Laboratory at Teddington. A series of wind tunnel tests confirmed that the aerodynamic properties of the design were in order, and in September, Cam approached the Air Ministry again. This time the response was favorable, and a prototype of the Interceptor monoplane was ordered. Shortly after this, the Air Ministry issued Specification F-534, which, drawing on the work of Squadron Leader Ralph Sorley, called for fighter aircraft to be armed with 8 guns. However, by this time, work had progressed too far to immediately modify the planned 4-gun installation. By January 1935, a wooden mock-up had been finished, and although a number of suggestions for detail changes were made, construction of the prototype was approved, and the new specification F-3634 was written around the design. In July of 1935, this specification was amended to include installation of 8 guns. Work on the airframe was completed at the end of August 1935, and the aircraft components were taken to Brooklands, where Hawkers had an assembly shed, and reassembled on the 23rd of October 1935. Ground testing and taxi trials took place over the following 2 weeks, and on the 6th of November 1935, the prototype took to the air for the first time at the hands of Hawker's chief test pilot, Flight Lieutenant George Bullman. Bullman was assisted by 2 other pilots in subsequent flight testing. Philip Lewis flew some of the experimental test flights, while John Hindmarsh conducted the first prototype's flight trials. RAF trials of the aircraft at Martlesham Heath began in February of 1936. Sammy Roth, later to be founding commandant of the Empire Test Pilot School, was the RAF test pilot for the Hurricane. His report was favorable, stating, "The aircraft is simple and easy to fly and has no apparent vices," and going on to its praise in control response. The type name Hurricane, proposed by Hawkers, was approved by the Air Ministry on the 26th of June. An informal christening ceremony was carried out the next month when King George VI paid a visit to Martlesham Heath. Further testing showed that the Hurricane had poor spin recovery characteristics, with all rudder authority being lost. Hawker's response was to request that spinning tests be waived, but the Air Ministry refused the request. The situation was resolved by the Royal Aircraft Establishment, who established that the problem was caused by a breakdown in the airflow over the fuselage, and could be cured by the addition of a small ventral fairing and extension of the bottom rudder. This discovery came too late to be incorporated in the first production aircraft, but was introduced in the 61st build and all subsequent aircraft. Though faster and more advanced than the RAF's current frontline biplane fighters, the Hurricane's constructional design was already outdated when introduced. It used the traditional Hawker construction techniques, with a Warren truss box girder primary fuselage structure, with a high-tensile steel longerons and duralumin cross-bracing using mechanically fastened rather than welded joints. Over this, wooden formers and stringer carried the dope linen covering. Initially, the wing structure consisted of 2 steel spars, and was also fabric covered. An all-metal stress skin wing of duraluminum was introduced in April of 1939, and was used for all of the later marks. The metal-skinned wings allowed for diving speed that was 80 miles per hour higher than the fabric-covered ones. They were very different in construction, but were interchangeable with the fabric-covered wings. One trials Hurricane was even flown with a fabric-covered port wing and a metal-covered starboard wing. The great advantage of the metal-covered wings over the fabric ones was that the metal ones could carry far greater stress loads without needing so much structure beneath. Several fabric wing Hurricanes were still in service during the Battle of Britain, although a good number had their wings replaced during servicing or after repair. Changing the wings only required 3 hours per work per aircraft. The prototype and early production Hurricanes were fitted with a Watts 2-bladed fixed-pitch wooden propeller. Since this was inefficient at low airspeeds, the aircraft required a long ground run to get airborne, causing concern for fighter command. Trials with a de Havilland variable pitch propeller reduced the takeoff run from 1,230 feet to 750 feet. Deliveries of these began in April of 1939. This was later replaced by the hydraulically operated constant-speed Rotal propeller, which came into service in the time for the Battle of Britain. Pilot Roland Beaumont describes his first flight in a Hurricane as such. Then, with the tail trimmer set, throttle and mixture lever fully forward, and puffs of gray exhaust smoke soon clearing at maximum RPM came the surprise. There was no sudden surge of acceleration, but with a thunderous roar from the exhausts just ahead of either side of the windscreen, only a steady increase in speed. In retrospect, that first Hurricane sortie was a moment of elation, but also relief. Apart from the new scale of speeds that the pilot had to adapt to, the Hurricane had all the qualities of its stable, secure biplane predecessor, the Hart, but enhanced by livelier controls, greater precision, and all this performance. One of CAM's priorities was to provide the pilot with good all-round visibility. To this end, the cockpit was mounted reasonably high in the fuselage, creating a distinctive humpbacked silhouette. Pilot access to the cockpit was aided by a retractable stirrup mounted below the trailing edge of the port wing. This was linked to a spring-loaded hinged flap, which covered a handhold on the fuselage, just behind the cockpit. When the flap was shut, the footstep retracted into the fuselage. In addition, both wing roots were coated with strips of non-slip material. An advantage of the steel tube structure was that cannon shells could pass right through the wood and fabric covering without exploding. Even if one of the steel tubes were damaged, the repair work required was relatively simple and could be done by ground crew at the airfield. A damaged stress skin structure, as used by the Spitfire, required more specialized equipment to repair. The old-fashioned structure also permitted the assembly of Hurricanes with relatively basic equipment under field conditions. Crated Hurricanes were assembled in West Africa and flown across the Sahara to the Middle East theater, and, to save space, some Royal Navy aircraft carriers carried their reserve Sea Hurricanes dismantled into their major assemblies. which were slung up in the hangar bulkheads and deckhead for reassembly when needed. In contrast, the contemporary Spitfire used all-metal construction and was thus both lighter and stronger, though less tolerant to bullet damage. With its ease of maintenance, widely set landing gear, and benign flying characteristics, the Hurricane remained in use in theaters of operations where reliability, easy handling, and a stable gun platform were more important than performance, typically in roles like ground attack. One of the design requirements of the original specification was that both the Hurricane and the Spitfire were also to be used as night fighter. The Hurricane proved to be a relatively simple aircraft to fly at night, and was to be instrumental in shooting down several German aircraft during the nocturnal hours. From early 1941, the Hurricane would also be used as an intruder aircraft, patrolling German airfields in France at night in an attempt to catch night bombers during takeoffs or landings. The Hurricane was ordered into production in June 1936, mainly due to its relatively simple construction and ease of manufacture. As war was looking increasingly likely, and time was of the essence in providing the RAF with an effective fighter aircraft, it was unclear if the more advanced Spitfire would enter production smoothly, while the Hurricane used well-understood manufacturing techniques. This was true for the service squadrons as well, who were experienced in working on and repairing aircraft whose construction employed the same principles as the Hurricane, and the simplicity of its design enabled the improvisation of some remarkable repairs in squadron workshops. The Hurricane was also significantly cheaper than the Spitfire, requiring 10,300 man-hours to produce rather than the 15,200 for the Spitfire. The maiden flight of the first production aircraft powered by a Merlin II engine took place on October 12, 1937. The first 4 aircraft to enter service with the RAF joined No. 111 Squadron RAF at RAF Northolt the following December. By the outbreak of the Second World War, nearly 500 Hurricanes had been produced and had equipped 18 squadrons. During 1940, Lord Beaverbrook, who was the Minister of Aircraft Production, established an organization in which a number of manufacturers were seconded to repair and overhaul battle-damaged Hurricanes. The Civilian Repair Organization also overhauled battle-weary aircraft, which were later sent to training units or to other air forces. One of the factories involved was the Austin Aero Company's Cofton Hackett plant. Another was David Rosenfield Limited, based in Barton Aerodrome near Manchester. Some 14,000 Hurricanes and Sea Hurricanes were produced. Most Hurricanes were built by Hawker, which produced them until 1944, with Hawker's sister company, the Gloucester Aircraft Company, making 2,750. The Austin Aero Company built 300. Canada Car and Foundry in Fort William, Ontario, Canada, was responsible for the production of 1,400 Hurricanes known as the Mark X. In War Thunder, there are 2 variants of the Hurricane, the Mark I and the Mark II. The Mark I is a Rank 1 fighter with a battle rating of 1.7. It has a maximum speed of 453 km an hour, a turn time of 23.1 seconds, and a rate of climb of 14.9 meters per second. The Mark II is a Rank 2 fighter with a battle rating of 2.3. It has a maximum speed of 472 km an hour, a turn time of 25.1 seconds, and a rate of climb of 8.5 meters per second. The Mark I is armed with 8 7.7mm Browning machine guns with 2,800 rounds, and has no secondary armaments. The Mark II is armed with 12 7.7mm Browning machine guns with 4,200 rounds. The Mark II has 2 secondary armament options, either 2 250-pound bombs or 6 RP-3 rockets. The machine guns are not the best for taking out heavy targets, so when taking on aircraft, aim for pilot kills or use your rockets. Both variants are quite maneuverable, so as long as you aren't up against a biplane, turn fighting is a possibility. The Hurricane is not the fastest aircraft, so don't expect to catch up to anything coming out of a dive. Also, the Hurricane itself is not very good at diving. It does not retain speed very well, so you'll bleed off energy very quickly. I hope that this information has proved helpful. If you liked the video, please do like the video. If you would like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and if you think anyone else would be interested in this video, don't be afraid to share it. This is Dauntless Sam. Thanks for watching.